and thank you all for attending. We're going to be talking about the Freeman Study Abroad Exchange Spanish Student Visa Application and Courier Service information, specifically for the fall 2023 semester. With me today in the background, we not only have Penny being our moderator, but I also have Lauren Bix and Aaron Forbes, our senior program coordinators. There's Lauren. They are monitoring questions and making sure that we have the support that we need. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my video, and we're going to all not be talking heads, and you're just going to listen to my talking voice. Today, we're going to kind of go over the overview and discuss a second passport option for some unique students. And then we're going to go through all of these requirements and particularly, in detail, review our key documents. And then we'll take some note. We'll go over some quick notes and a recap at the end. And there should be plenty of time for Q&A after that. So today's information is intended to assist you, our families, with supporting your students with their visa application process. Please be sure to encourage your students to take ownership of this process and to do the majority of this work themselves. It's a very important process, but it is, it's a lot, and we recognize that. But we want to provide as much support as we can for our students to learn and grow through this process. So what is this, right? Freeman Study Abroad Exchange has arranged with the Spanish Consulate in Houston to submit our students' visa applications as a batch. This helps our students as well as the consulate and usually results in quicker processing of the applications than if each student applied independently. So today's presentation will elaborate on the instructions that students already have in their Freeman Abroad portal. This is their password protected portal where they have access to all kinds of information that we provide to them as part of their application process. This service is provided for students participating in Freeman Abroad programs and only select non-Freeman programs. So only one or two other non-Freeman programs. Basically, students attending programs offering their own batch visa processing services are required to utilize those program services. Those would be your CIEE and CEA programs and maybe some other provider programs offered through different offices at Tulane. So the deadline for the students to submit their materials to our office, in person is April 19th. We do provide this box link in their Freeman Abroad portal and to you publicly, but many of our students have already shared this box link with their families. So that everybody has a copy of what all is required and some templates and things like that. And then we advise students to come in person prior to that April 19th date. Once they're ready to turn in their completed application, they can come in. They can make an appointment using the SARS appointment system, which is a password protected system as well. Or they can come in for walk-in hours. We have walk-in hours every weekday, normally from 2 to 3 p.m. But also we're going to have open office hours for walk-ins those days leading up to that deadline. So April 17th, 18th, and 19th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. in our office, which is in Goldring Waldenberg Business Complex, GWBC. We're in Suite 220. Students can just come in and we will, hopefully it's not too many students at one time, but generally we sit down with each student, we review the materials and do our best to make sure that it meets the Spanish Consulate requirements. Now, some students do need to apply independently. We do ask that they indicate this using the questionnaire titled Spanish Student Visa Courier Service within their portal. We do still recommend that these students also submit their application to the Houston Consulate. As students of Tulane, they are considered under the Houston Consulate's jurisdiction. And the Houston Consulate knows our program. They know our insurance documents. In particular, that's a specific Spanish government requirement. And so, we've had students have difficulty at the consulates under which, their home address is jurisdiction because they're not as familiar with our programs. The applications are all to be submitted via mail to the Houston Consulate, so it's not like an in-person appointment is required. And we do recommend that those students follow the same basic instructions that we have available to everyone in box, and then make an appointment with us to obtain the necessary materials such as the acceptance and insurance letters from our office. We do like to make sure that everybody knows that the student must submit their physical passport with the application, and that passport will remain at the consulate during the processing of the visa. And I'll talk more about that throughout the process, but it's important to remember that, you know, you're not going to have your passport during that time period. And of course, the Spanish government does reserve the right to change its requirements without notice. So sometimes there are additional requirements that might be requested that we don't have control over. And the consulate does recommend that students do not purchase their travel tickets until the visa has been approved and the passport has been returned. Now, this visa processing time can take up to 8 weeks. In the batch visa process, it typically takes a little less than that, but the window of time that they ask us to give them is 8 weeks. Therefore, if a student has international travel scheduled during that time period when their passport will be with the Spanish consulate, they may want to apply for a second US passport. That's through the US Department of State. And there's this link here with the US Department of State. And we would supply a letter of support for the student. So we do recommend that they request that using a questionnaire that they have in their Freeman Abroad portal. And, you know, they can come in and talk to us about this. A lot of students have already consulted with us on this. It is notable, however, that the passport processing times with the passport office have become rather problematic recently. So we encourage families to research their best options with regards to this process. Tulane cannot intervene on behalf of any student with a foreign government nor the US Department of State. So it's important that students are really kind of weighing their options if they're facing these kinds of choices. Some choices could be not to do the international travel or postpone it, or maybe to postpone application for the visa and do an individual application with the Spanish consulate after they return from their travel. It is up to each individual as to what they want to do. All right, so let's talk about the requirements. So the materials that are going to be provided by the student is this list. And we're going to go over the ones in yellow in greater detail in slides following these. So your Tulane University Courier Service Terms and Conditions form, the Postal Delivery Authorization form is required, an original notarized letter authorizing me to present the application on the student's behalf, a notarized copy of their student ID card. We call it the splash card, an original notarized paper plus 1 copy. Spanish visa application form, original and copy, 2 passport-sized photos, visa application fee with a money order only, evidence of funds, we'll talk a lot about that later, original passport and photocopy, a prepaid self-addressed US Postal Service envelope, and for non-US citizens, evidence of legal status in the US, so an original notarized copy of their green card and a copy. The materials that we provide, that we put into the student's application binder, is their acceptance letter from the host university and from Tulane, and then the health insurance visa letter that we provide. So the students don't have to do that for themselves. Some general notes about the whole process. All documents should be one-sided and not stapled. Notarizations may be done outside of Louisiana. Some of the local notaries that we're aware of that are close by are ABC Title. There's one facility on Claiborne, very close to the UPS store, but there's also a notary that works out of the UPS store. And that's just basically right across Claiborne Street from the baseball stadium. And also Tulane has an Office of General Counsel in Gibson Hall, but that's by appointment only. The FedEx office in the LBC, which is the Student Center, can provide passport-sized photos and a digital copy that we recommend students get because they're going to need that with their ECOT secondary application. We recommend that students do not affix the photos to the application form until our staff has had a chance to review the form with the students. We keep glue in the office so that we just glue them right here when they're ready to turn them in. It is important to remember that processing time is up to 8 weeks from submission of application. So, it is important for students to plan accordingly to have that time window where they're waiting for the application. I'm sorry, they're waiting for the visa to be sent back to them. Yeah. All right, so one of the key documents that I'd like to talk about and I'd like to read over with you today are the terms and conditions document. It is important for us all to know what is and is not required, or what do I want to say? What students can and cannot expect from Tulane University as as part of this process. So I'd like to read this over with you and make sure that it's very clear. Tulane University has been granted permission by the Spanish Consulate in Houston to apply for Spanish visas on behalf of any student participating in a semester or year-long study abroad program in Spain. In providing this service, Tulane University acts only as an agent and accepts no responsibility for the services of the Spanish Consulate in connection with the granting of visas, nor for any delays, loss of passport occasioned by such services, or by the U.S. Postal Service. Tulane University will not be liable for any damages, whether direct, incidental, special, or consequential for visa processing. Requirements and fees related to the processing of visas are subject to change, including but not limited to consular fees, application forms, documentation required for visa issuance. They're all subject to change without notice. And Tulane University cannot be responsible for any loss or delay relating to such changes. Tulane is also not responsible for the actions or inaction of the Spanish Consulate and its personnel. At its discretion, the Spanish Consulate may request revised or additional documentation or decline issuance of travel documents. They may not disclose the reason for denial of a visa or for the request for additional documentation. Tulane is not and shall not be responsible for delayed processing times, trip cancellation, or any other loss relating to actions or inaction of the Spanish Consulate. Tulane will not be responsible for loss or delay caused by the events that we cannot control, such as, including but not limited to, acts of God, weather conditions, acts of public enemies, wars, strikes, civil commotions, or acts or omissions of public authorities, including the consular officials, with actual or apparent authority. Tulane University does reserve the right to decline processing of documents for reasons including but not limited to incomplete documentation and or insufficient processing time. When the Spanish Consulate returns your passport and other documents, it is critically important that the student immediately verifies that the visa they require for the trip has been obtained, that the visa is valid for the dates of the visit, and that the passport is valid for at least 6 months beyond the completion of the trip. So the program end date and the completion of the trip needs to have another 6-month window after that before the passport itself expires. By signing below, the student certifies that they've read, understand, and agree to the terms and conditions outlined above. So that's a pretty important part of this process. I meant to mention earlier that this is the box folder. So you can see it's basically just a folder with all of these documents included. The Spain visa application requirements is your primary document that includes all of the kind of detailed instructions for each requirement. And then we have a quick checklist so that once you've kind of gone through all that information, you have a quick bulleted checklist to make sure that your student has, or the student can make sure that they have all of what they need for that process. Now, I grouped the notarized items on this one slide because sometimes it's nice to have all that in one place. The copy of the Splash ID card front and back needs to be notarized. The letter authorizing me to submit the application on the student's behalf needs to be notarized. And then if a sponsor is providing financial documents, the sponsor letter must be notarized. And they may be notarized outside of Louisiana, like I mentioned before. So let's take a look real quick at the sample, the sample authorization letter. So you see here, this is meant to be a template where the student takes it and makes it their own. So they can take this information and save it as a Word document and then replace it with their information and wherever the notary public would be. All right, let's go back to the slide. And then the sponsor letter, we're going to talk about in another slide. We do recommend that students use the cheat sheet for the application. And so this is basically a copy of the application form itself, but all this red type is us giving students instructions on what to put and what not to put and things to watch out for in the application. They need to fill out every block. Don't leave anything blank, right? NA if it doesn't pertain to you. And use the date form that is common for Europe, which is day, month, year. They need to be printed one-sided, and we need 2 copies in the end. So students fill out their information here. They select the correct options here, and they write NA, and then they fill out this information. This box number 17, it's important that they put their New Orleans address, and it should be a mailing address. So if they were living on campus, they can include their post office box number. It does not have to be an address that's valid after the semester's over. Basically, this is establishing the student's residence within the Houston Consulate's jurisdiction. Then they complete this as per their personal information. They should put the date they plan to arrive. This is not something that's going to be checked later on. So if plans change, it's okay. But they don't want to see a date that's too early. So it shouldn't be more than like 30 days before the program start date. It's also important that students put multiple entries here because you don't want to be limited to only one entry to Spain and then you can't travel around Europe at will. And then here, if a student has the housing already, then they can put that address here. Otherwise, they would put the address for ICADE, which they can see in box number 28. So we're going to scroll down to there. Here's box number 28, where we have the ICADE information. So they should put exactly this information in. Oh, and I should mention that this document cannot be handwritten. It must be typed. And it has to be, legible, and it can't be in red. This is in red for students to see, but it's not for students to type in red. They do need to put the orientation date and the last date of exams. It's better to look at the acceptance letter that they received from ICADE and match those dates to that, because the consulate looks and tries to match those dates. And then once the student is ready to date and sign, they would put the location and the date, and then they would sign here with a pen. Can't be in pencil. All right, so that's the cheat sheet in the application form. And we went over those. All right, now let's talk about financial means, proof of financial means. It is standard practice for students to have to provide proof of financial means in order to get a student visa. Students have to provide that when they come to the US. And so, some students have enough in their own bank account to provide their own personal financial information. The amount that they have to show 3 months in a row, ending balance is at least $2,784 for each month. And I'll show you a sample bank statement in just a minute. But it should be the student's personal bank account. It needs to be either checking or savings only. It has to be liquid funds. Anything non-liquid, like an investment or a money market account, or future income that's not readily available would not be eligible. The name of the student must show on the bank statements, and it should be the most recent 3 months available. We're going to talk about bank statement dates in a couple of minutes, because that's a bit of a tricky part of this. But it also, in terms of the bank statement, it only needs to be the summary page. It does not need to be the subsequent pages with all of the different transactions. And we talked about that end balance of at least 2,784 for all 3 months. And the account number may be obscured for privacy, but you should leave at least the last 4 digits so that the consulate can confirm that the statements are from the same account. So let's look at those sample bank statements right quick. And these are all in that box folder. So you can see here's the first one, February 2019, the student's or the parent's name and address, the starting balance and ending balance, see beginning balance and ending balance for this period in the checking account. And this amount is above that 2,784. And so then here's the March statement, and then here's the April statement. All right. Now, if the student does not have enough money in their bank account, it is very common for them to provide sponsor information. And so if that's the case, then the sponsor's bank account information would be provided, and then that person would write a letter of support using our template and have that notarized. So here's a copy of the template for that. And again, this is all in the box folder. So basically it says, you know, to whom it may concern, I will certify that I am the person's legal guardian, and I will support him or her with a monthly allowance of at least, now this is the amount that does change, so it's not in here. I'll show you where that information is. While he or she is in Spain, and I'm financially responsible for any emergency that may arise. So this is the letter that needs to be notarized. The amount that you have to show is here in the main information. And I believe that that is $696. I know it's $696. Here it is, $696 per month. We keep that in this document and not in the template because that amount does change from year to year. So, all right. We also need a copy of the sponsor's ID. It does not have to be notarized. So the only thing that needs to be notarized is that letter of support. And the financial documents are the same requirements as for the student that we just talked about. And it's important to know that a letter from a bank is not really accepted. Really, they're looking for those statements. Now let's talk about account statement dates. This is the fun part. If account statements are issued mid-month, so for example, on the 15th of every month, then the student should submit the three latest statements by that April 19th deadline. So that's your February, March, April, ending on like April 15th. And they can submit that. Everything's done by April 19th. But if the account statements are issued on the last day of the month, then the student will submit 2 of the latest statements by the April 19th deadline. Then we need 2 copies of that April statement by May 5th. Our visa appointment, our consulate appointment is after that date. It's in early May, but we're able to accept that last statement during that first week of May, but we really don't want to be receiving students like full applications at that point because we still have to process everything. So it's really important that they submit everything on time, except for those last 2, copies of that one bank statement. And then finally, some account statements are only issued quarterly. And then there's kind of a long time period between the end of the statement and when the visa application submission is. So in those cases, the quarterly statement plus a letter from the bank indicating the current balance is acceptable. For example, if submitting an application in May, but the bank statement is only from January to March, then the student should submit the January to March bank statement plus a letter from the bank indicating the current balance of the same account. Let's take a look again at that sample bank statement. So again, you're looking at the dates, the date range of the statement. It's only the summary page. It has the appropriate name, either the student or the sponsor. And it's a checking or savings account, and it has that balance that's beginning and ending above the 2,748 threshold. Actually, it's the ending balance of each period. So, all right, now let's talk about the money order. Our students are young and many of them have never heard of a money order before, and they're not really familiar with checks anymore because it's not part of the way we do business anymore. So we often have to explain it to students, which is fine. But yeah, it does sometimes take a little bit for them to kind of understand how it all works. They are easily obtainable from the bank or from the post office or even some grocery stores. If required, some money orders do require there to be a receiver. Then they would say the Consulate General of Houston, Consulate General of Spain of Houston, and the address, which is that 1800 Bering Street address. Personal checks are not accepted with these applications. It's really important that the student not submit a personal check. The amount of the money order for US citizens must be $160 payable to the Consulate General of Spain. Non-US citizens, it depends on the country of citizenship. So if we have someone who's a citizen of, say, Colombia, their visa application fee would be different from the US citizens. And so we can look that information up. Students can look it up, or we can help them find it. This money order must be completed in full and signed if required on the front. Some money orders do require that sender's signature, some do not. But we do want to make sure that the student's name is written on the front of the money order to ensure that it stays matched to the application. We don't want those money orders getting kind of loose when we're processing, 100 applications. And then it's important for students to know that the back of the money order must not be signed. That invalidates it. Because they don't really understand how money orders and checks work. A lot of times students don't necessarily know that information. All right, now it's time to talk about our prepaid self-addressed US Postal Service envelope. It should be the document envelope, so the 12.5 by 9.5 flat rate envelope. It can be priority or express, but it must be US Postal Service. It cannot be FedEx, it cannot be UPS, it has to be US Postal Service. Postage and tracking must be affixed to the envelope. Sometimes students bring that in and we show them where to affix it. It's fine. But it's important that it's not just all loose. Also, the to address must be the address where the passport is to be mailed. So the student should use the address where they will be over the summer or where their passport can be received on behalf of the student. So if the student or the family is traveling internationally during that processing period, then I would say, designate someone who can receive the passport on your behalf in order to make sure that it's not sent to a place where it won't be accepted. The from address must be the Spanish Consulate in Houston, and their address again is 1800 Bering Drive, Suite 750, Houston, Texas. And then we also advise students to keep a photo of the tracking information for their records. So usually before they leave the office, we remind them, oh, take a picture of the thing with your phone. We do recommend a couple of local post offices on the Loyola campus in their student center called the Dana Center. There is a small post office. They only accept cash, however, and they don't always have adequate supplies because they're a very small office. So the next closest office is the US Postal Service at 2000 Louisiana Avenue. And of course, downtown, there's the big post office at 701 Loyola Avenue. That's not Loyola University, that's Loyola Avenue, downtown near the Superdome. They also have a passport acceptance facility. It's a big post office. And of course, there are other post offices around the city, but we do not recommend that students use the post office on Carrollton, 3400 South Carrollton Avenue. They have repeatedly given students misinformation, and so we try to avoid them. I found some images to show you kind of what to expect or what to look for. There are two possibilities that we look at. One is where the student handwrites the address to and from. So this is the Spanish Consulate of Houston. This is the student's name and address. And then of course, this is the postage, right? It's actually a stamp It's usually about $9.95, if I remember correctly. So it costs about $10 to send it. A lot of times they also have an additional tracking sticker if the post office is not using the pre-printed tracking information. Sometimes, however, the post office will print this label and have the tracking information just right on this sticky label, and that's fine as well, as long as the postage is prepaid and the tracking is also prepaid. That's what we need to see. All right, so let's go over a couple of notes and then we'll recap and then we'll be ready for Q&A. It is important for students to remember that our office cannot intervene with the Spanish government processes. So we're acting as their agent and submitting this on their behalf, but these are not our policies and we cannot intervene with their processes. Our office also cannot give students updates on the processing status. So once we submit those materials to the Spanish Consulate, we do not get updates on how it's going. And it is important for students and parents to be very patient and allow them time to process the applications. In general, if there's an issue with an individual application, that student will be individually emailed by the consulate. So it's important for students to be checking their Tulane email regularly throughout this process. And it's important for them to remember that they are ultimately responsible for the content of their application. Although we do advise the students and we try to catch all those possible mistakes, we cannot guarantee that there won't be issues when the consulate is processing the applications. And students should also remember those terms and conditions outlined in the signed document. And again, we recommend that the students use the instructions, the cheat sheet, and the quick checklist, and all of the templates provided in that box folder. Okay, to recap, please encourage your student to take ownership of this process and do the majority of the work in obtaining and assembling these materials for themselves. This is really an important learning process in the study abroad sort of like pathway. Learning how to deal with government agencies and how to assemble these materials and how to keep track of things is an important part of this whole thing. Notarized documents, of course, do require planning and preparations, which is why we're glad that we're able to have this interaction with families over spring break. So hopefully a lot of that can get done while students are on break. The students need to remember that their passports will be surrendered to the consulate on their behalf. And once those materials are submitted, they have to wait until the visas are issued and the passports are mailed back to them. They're not going to be able to get their passports back from the consulate before those visas are processed. And again, some of those bank statements may need to be submitted later than April 19th. So all the other materials should be submitted on time. And then they should bring those 2 copies of the final statement to our office in person before May 5th, 2023, or to communicate with us closely about it. And again, we will be available for all-day walk-in service April 17th, 18th, and 19th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Our office does close promptly at 5 p.m., but we do our best to accommodate students as much as we can. All right, so that finishes my section. Thank you so much for listening to me. Penny, do you have some questions for me?
Yes. So if you have a question, you can type it in now. So I think that a couple of these may have been answered by the time the presentation went on. So you have talked about the deadline to get in any statement that didn't meet that first April deadline. And so that next deadline is submit everything else and then submit that last April statement on May
5th.
5th. That's what I thought.
By May 5th, please.
So the next question is, what if a student's passport expires at the end of April 2024? It's a bit shy of the 6 months, assuming that the program ends in December. Do they renew their passport now or wait until after the visa is complete?
They run the risk of not getting approved for the visa. So we have tried to catch all students whose expiration dates are within that 6-month time window, but if we missed a student, I apologize. But, it's I don't think it's a hard and fast requirement, but I know that the Spanish consulate does look at that, and there is the kind of serious risk that they would not be granted the visa, which would, then create a whole domino effect after that. If they then have to get a renewed passport and then have to reapply for the visa, you're talking about probably not being able to participate. So I don't think that's a risk that I would advise students to take. What I advise them to do is to get a new passport, get it expedited, and they're going to have to apply for their visa independently. They're not going to be able to meet our deadlines.
Okay, so
Yeah.
apply
those-
for their passport renewal,
Yeah.
expedite it. So use one of those expedited services, then apply independently
For the visa.
for the visa.
Mhm.
Okay, so the next question is, my student lives in New Jersey and needs to file independently. She met with the Freeman Study Abroad office and was told to still send it to the Houston consulate. Will they process it given that she's showing as a New Jersey resident?
Yes, that's what I was talking about. Let's see if I can find that slide. It is important for them to know this because it was right at the beginning, I think. Here we go. Yeah, so the Houston, because students are full-time Tulane students, then they qualify to be under the Houston consulate's jurisdiction. And the Houston consulate only accepts these applications by mail. So, and they're familiar with our program and with our documents. So we really do urge that students use the Houston consulate for this particular application. They're going to have an easier time of it. The Spanish government's health insurance requirements are rather stringent, and we had some challenges last year because the other consulates were not familiar with our health insurance documentation. Whereas with the Houston consulate, we send that to them ahead of time and make sure that it meets all their requirements, and they review it and confirm that with us. So they've already seen that document before we even confirm the appointment. Whereas the other consulates may not necessarily. And so students have had delays with other consulates in the US. And I suspect that's one of the reasons. Does that answer it clearly enough?
If that person still has a question, submit a clarification of that. So the next question is, are the students getting this same information in a webinar? So we provide webinars for parents to give supplemental information to what students are receiving. So Mary, I'll just ask you to again kind of give the notes on how the students are being guided through this and what information they've been given. Now, parents,
Sure.
you can certainly share the recording of this with them, the video. Once we send that to you, you're welcome to do that. But Mary, tell them everything about what students are.
Sure. Yeah, so we did a special orientation for the students going to Spain, and we went through this with them, and they have access to all of these materials and instructions in the portal, and they have access to us. So they make appointments with us and can come in and ask questions, or they can come in during our daily walk-in hour from 2 to 3. So yeah, all of this has been provided to the students, and the orientation that we did with the students, it was recorded, and actually I did a separate recording, and we provide it for them in Canvas, in their orientation course inside of Canvas.
Okay, next question. And I think this has been clarified in your talk earlier. For the bank accounts, can it be a parent's bank account? And so yes, I understand correctly.
Mm-hmm.
A parent can be one of those sponsors that you described.
Correct. Yeah, it's typically parents, but we don't assume that it's always parents. So I don't like to say parents, it's a sponsor. Yes, if the parent is providing their financial information, they follow the same guidelines for the bank statements, and they just use our template to write a letter of support that has specific information in it. And they get that notarized. The letter needs to be notarized, but the copy of their ID does not have to be notarized.
When sending all the documents to Houston, is there a specific person to send to, or just the Consulate General of Spain?
So I'm assuming that's for an independent application. They would just send it to the Consulate General of Houston on that Bering
Consulate
Street
General of
address.
Spain in Houston.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. For the postage on the USPS envelope, can you use click and ship? Can we print our own label from home? Also, does each student have to individually mail their envelope, even though this is a batch submission? They're a bit confused about sort of submitting them together and how the
Okay.
play.
Yeah. So the students are submitting all of their materials to us, and this priority mail envelope doesn't have anything in it, right? So we usually fold it and submit it with the paper materials and the passport and the money order as one, like set of application materials, so that when the passport is ready to be returned, they then just stick the passport in this envelope and send it back to the students. The students are not submitting their materials to us in an envelope. They're submitting it to us, and we're keeping them in file folders, and then we will transport them to the consulate. So it's, if they're applying independently, then they would ship all of this, including this empty postage paid pre-addressed envelope, in whatever type of postal service they want, right? They could FedEx it to the Houston consulate as long as the Houston consulate receives it. But when the Houston consulate is sending the passports back, it has to be U.S. Postal Service. Does that make sense?
Prepaid envelope.
Right, so that they can just stick the passport back in there and ship it to the student very quickly. And the student should have that tracking information. So, like they can check the tracking and see when it's been shipped and when it's expected to arrive.
So does this visa application process also apply to the Newcomb Study Abroad program? The questioner's daughter has been accepted to the program in Madrid.
No. So we covered that in the beginning. This is for the programs that, Freeman Abroad runs. And I believe there's one program to Complutense in Spain with the Office of Study Abroad that they use our visa courier service. And that's like 1 or 2 students doing that program. But the program provider programs like CIEE and CEA, they do their own batch visa processing. So it's important that students go through the program that they are participating in for this service.
Okay. So question is, do you know what form needs to be filled out for a second passport, and how long does that generally take?
So it depends on the situation, and the processing times have been increasing lately. So, I've gotten a lot of conflicting information from people. Different people are talking to different passport offices in different states, and I'm getting all kinds of different information. So I really don't feel confident answering that information. You really do need to interface with the U.S. Department of State about getting a second passport. And, we provide that letter of support for the student, but otherwise, it's important that families handle that with the U.S. passport office.
Another question is, what amount of prepaid postage do we purchase? And you mentioned that it's almost $10. And it
Priority is about $10. I think Express is something like $20 or $30. I'm not sure. But it's whatever the priority mail, like document envelope postage is, whatever they get charged by the U.S. Postal Service. So we've accepted a couple already this year that had those stamps that look exactly like the one in this picture. And I think it's $9.95.
And Mary, is that like a 9 by 12 inch
Correct.
envelope?
Yep.
So therefore, large documents like regular.
12.
Oh, okay, I see. 12 and a
12 and a half by 9.5. Yep.
Do the notarized documents need a witness?
Some do, yeah. So if you look at the templates, let's see. I don't think this one does, but I think that I can't remember. There's one of them that requires a witness. Maybe it's this one. No, yeah, this one does.
And is the witness usually in the notary's office, or should a student bring somebody with them? I guess maybe the person's just trying to,
Depends on the situation.
okay. So,
We've had students come in and they went together and they witnessed each other's documents. So, you know, it's, yeah.
So this questioner says, my daughter has an appointment to turn in all of her materials before April 17th. On April 17th is when our bank statements come out. And so can she just come back to you? So you answered this in your presentation.
Yeah.
So briefly.
And the deadline is April 19th. But if her appointment is on the 17th and she wants to turn in everything except that April 17th, yeah. And sometimes like the bank will issue the statement until April 17th, but that statement won't actually be produced for another like 2 days. That's fine too. You know, we have a time window because it takes a long time for us to process all of these applications. So we have that kind of 2.5 week time window where we're processing these applications that we can receive those kind of later materials that the students can't submit by the deadline.
Next question is, I'm planning to have my son lead the process, but to eliminate his doing a few of the errands, is there any reason why a parent wouldn't obtain the stamped prepaid envelope, the money order, or the notarized parent bank form and mail those to the student?
We do not get involved. We
Okay.
encourage the student to do it because, you know, going through those, but definitely, you know, if you want to help your son or daughter out, we don't get involved in that. You can do that.
What do you recommend for health insurance while abroad?
So the health insurance is actually provided as part of the program. You know, I didn't cover that in this one because that was in our other webinar that we did. And we provide the documentation of that. So let's see, that would be here. So the GO Blue International Student Health Insurance is included in the program. We get the students covered. They don't get to opt out. It's part of the program. And so then we request the health insurance visa letter directly from GO Blue. We print it and we put it in their application. This is actually one of the reasons why for independent applications, so if a student is not going through the Visa Courier service, they're going to need this letter from us to put in their application. So we definitely need those students who cannot utilize our courier services to let us know using their questionnaire so that we can make sure that we meet with them and we give them those materials that we would normally just put in a student's application.
So we have a few more questions.
Okay.
Does my address need to be printed on the bank statements? When I print the statement, only my name appears in the summary.
Interesting.
No address. So maybe they would need to contact their bank and get something special.
I don't know. I mean, if it's a bank statement, the name must show in the bank statements, but I don't think that it's a specific requirement that the address shows.
Okay.
It's really important, you know, that it has the basic summary. So it's the monthly summary, and they're really looking for, you know, the name, the dates of the statement, the fact that it's the same bank account 3 months in a row, that it's liquid funds, and that it has the appropriate ending balance all 3 months in a row.
Do the parents have access to the documents that have been referenced, or only the students? So explain again where these documents live for the student.
Yep. So we've provided a box link, and it is available publicly. I've put it in a couple of places. Here we go. So, you know, when we publish this PDF, you can access it, but the students have this link in their portal. They can forward it to you. We've sent it out to several parents already so far. You know, you can email Freeman Abroad at tulane.edu and we can send it to you. But certainly it's accessible to anyone who has this link. So you do need this link. We're happy to provide it for you. And that leads you to the this folder with the documents. Okay.
Okay. If the parent sends the parent support letter for the bank account and their bank account statements, do they also have to send bank statements from the student's bank account as well?
Nope. Nope.
If we are filing independently, can we FedEx to the consulate in Houston? I know the return envelope we include with the shipment needs to be USPS, but can we ship there by any express service? So you
Yes.
just say that that could be
Mhm.
any other mail or shipping service.
Yeah.
Okay. And then let's see, a follow-up question. Can the postage for the passport return envelope be printed from an online USPS service, click and ship?
I believe so. You know, it basically needs to be the priority mail envelope. So yeah, wherever that's printed, I don't think it matters. We've seen students come in with, you know, this style of sticker from the Postal Service. So I imagine if that's what's printing out from your home printer, that that would work as well.
If a student needs to apply separately, needs to renew the passport, will there be someone who can assist and make sure they have the correct materials sent to the consulate?
Yeah, I mean, we can meet with the student and go over their documents. We have no problem with that.
But you're not, since they would have to renew the passport, they're not sending it by that your regular deadline for the batch process.
Right. Right. But, you know, we do recommend, and the student's going to need those acceptance and insurance documents from us. Yeah. So we definitely want to be involved and
review
help.
it with them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always good to have, you know, that additional pair of eyes on the application because it's so much detail. Yeah. And we work over the summer, so we'll be here.
So next question, when will the health insurance documentation be available to students?
I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah,
Probably.
okay.
Yeah.
And that means like that insurance that comes as a part of being in the program,
Correct.
that'll go to the student to be their health insurance card, I guess is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, so like the student, yeah, okay. So the student will get signed up for the health insurance and they will receive an email that it will instruct them to go on to geobluestudents.com and set up a login. One important thing for families to know is that they can share their certificate number with their loved ones. And there's a parent portal in geobluestudents.com where the parent can see like the policy information. They can't see the student's personal information for privacy reasons, but they can see the coverage, which is, you know, it's often very helpful. Yeah, so the student will get that login and they can see their policy information. They can download their ID card, which we do counsel them to keep with them at all times while they're abroad. They also do need to maintain their domestic health insurance while they're abroad. But the letter that they have to provide with this visa application, the one that they download from the GeoBlue website is not actually what they need for this visa application. Because the Spanish government changed its insurance requirements a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I don't remember, midstream, we had to purchase an additional policy just for the Spanish students. And so that's a special letter that includes special information to make sure that the Spanish government can see that the insurance policy meets their criteria. So the students won't get that particular letter as part of their GeoBlue login. That's why we want to provide it to those independent applicants.
Okay, next question. And we might have to ask this person to clarify unless Mary understands this better than I, which probably
Okay.
doesn't. Can you unlock the application so we can type it?
Oh, it's a flat PDF. It's not a form. So no, I don't control the Spanish visa application form. But if you have like the PDF software, the PDF reader, I think you can edit and you can type into a PDF. Most students don't have any difficulties typing onto the PDF. But you can also go to the Spanish Consulate's website, the Spanish Consulate General of Houston, and download the application form that they have there. It might be a fillable form by now, I'm not sure.
Do they need to send all of the pages of the bank statements or just the first page? And I think I remember you said just the summary page.
That's right, just the summary page. They're really not looking for all the individual transactions. They just need to see those dates and amounts.
How quickly can a student get a letter from your office that they need for applying for a second passport?
Pretty quickly. They indicate that on the questionnaire in their Freeman Abroad portal. And then typically I'll email them a letter within a couple of days. And if the student makes an appointment, then we can do it right away.
Okay. If they need to get a second passport and might not be able to submit the first passport with the application by April 19th, can the student submit everything else and then get the passport to you by May 5th? My
Yes.
understanding of what you've said is that if they don't have a second passport now, they probably wouldn't get it by May 5th. Is that correct?
It depends on if they've already applied for that, there's a chance that it might come in. So yeah, I mean, like we'll work with students if there's something that's not quite here yet. That's why we pad that time in pretty heavily. So yeah, if they can get it to me by May 5th, then we can include it with the application and we have everything else in order, then we can slip it right in and we'll be fine. But if they have not already submitted an application for a second passport, the chances of them having it by May 5th are very slim.
Could you repeat, what's the amount for parent support banking statements that they have to show monthly? The parent's going to be their supporter.
It's the same as what they have to show. So it's $2,784. Oh, it's $2,784 for the fall semester.
So I'll make a last call for questions, parents and family members, if you'll submit those right now. If I don't see any new questions coming in, then we'll probably end in just a second. I'll just let you know, this is the first time that we've collaborated to provide this particular topic within our parent series. So if you have any questions or concerns, or if you've got compliments or feedback about this topic being part of our series, you can send that to me at families@tulane.edu and I'll share that with Mary. If you have specific questions that are related to the content, to this Spanish visa courier service that they are providing, then those questions need to go directly to the Freeman Study Abroad and Exchange Program office. So that's that first set of contact information there that you see on the screen. And then my office, if you have feedback in general, want to suggest other webinar topics for the future, I'm happy to entertain those. And so let's see, a couple other questions. Where can a student find the recording of the student orientation that you held?
In Canvas.
And Canvas, folks, is the online learning management system that the students use all the time for everything. And so they have them for individual courses. And then when there are other things like this that are set up where there's a lot of documentation and need to kind of help the students keep everything compiled in one place, then like the program has put that in Canvas for them as well. So they should be quite adept at using Canvas. The last question is, if my child has the required balance in their account, then the parent doesn't need to submit additional financial information. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Well,
right.
thank you everyone for your time and attention tonight. I'm really grateful to Mary and also to her other staff who are behind the scenes that you may not see how they're helping out, but they are also there as well. And so many thanks to everybody who joined us tonight. And then again, you'll get this information in an email, but it does take a little bit of time for us to get everything uploaded to the YouTube channel. So please be patient for that. And thank you so much for your interest. And everybody have a great evening and a good upcoming weekend.
Thank you so much, Penny.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.